Hello and welcome to Quarantine Zone, a podcast for HBO's The Last of Us. We are your hosts, Andrew Sorsini,
Dwayne D,
and Tosin Unafawakin.
So we haven't started the new season yet. This is basically an opportunity for us to shake off the cobwebs, reintroduce you to us, because it's been a hot minute since we all have done any podcasting for a while. So this is our opportunity to talk about the season to come and what we expect. But first, we've got some online spots where you can get in contact with us. You can write to us or email us a voice memo at quarantinezonepod@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at QZPod. Add us on iTunes. Like us. Leave us a review. That's how we get noticed. But the best thing you can do, as always, spread the word. Tell your friends. So Tosin and Dwayne, it's been a while since the last time that we podcasted together was for the last episode of Fallout, Amazon Prime's Fallout.
Right, that was 24, right?
24? Was it? Or was it 23?
No, it was 2024. It was last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It hasn't been that long, maybe.
So much has happened.
A lot
I've
has
lived
happened.
lifetimes
Feels like 10
since
years.
then.
The hair is grayer. The kids are older.
And if you haven't heard that podcast and you're watching Fallout, highly recommend that podcast. Is called Vault 33. It's everywhere you find fine podcasts. But we're here to talk about The Last of Us. Let's talk about. So I have to make a confession going into season 2. You guys know this, but I have not played The Last of Us Part 2 video game. I played The Last of Us, the first video game, but I haven't played the second one for a number of reasons, mostly which I just never had. I didn't have the console that it was available on. I think it came out on the
PS4.
PS4. Right. I think they did have a sort of like a low res version on the PS3, but by that time I had stopped playing the PS3.
Nope, it was never on.
It was never on the PS3, so
yeah.
I never had
a PS4, PS5, and you can get it on Windows.
Yes, I saw it on my Steam, in my Steam, advertised on Steam now, and I might get it at some point, but I wouldn't be able to get it and play it by the time the show spins up again. So I'm going into this completely blind. What about you, Dwayne? What's your relationship to The Last of Us Part 2?
I haven't played it extensively because I never bought a PS4. I was going to buy a PS5, but I never got around to it. So I played it on my godson's console. It has one big change, at least for me, that I thought was awesome, which is that it allows you to crawl in prone position, sort of like not quite army crawl, but pretty low.
Oh.
You couldn't do that in the first one. So you can be in tall grasses and stuff and kind of sneak. And it felt a little bit more like there was this game, Thief, back in the day.
Oh, yeah, I remember Thief.
Yeah, Thief was probably one of my all-time favorite games because I was a big Quake guy. And in
Right.
Quake, you run around blasting people with your rocket launcher. But in Thief, you can't kill anybody. You're weak as F, right? So unless you can
It's
sneak
all
up behind
stealth.
to make a big jump on them.
Right?
Yeah, it's all stealth.
Kind of
So-
like Assassin's Creed is a little the same way, right?
Exactly.
Relies on
Although
stealth.
I haven't exactly. I haven't played a ton of Assassin's Creed, but Thief is Assassin's Creed. You're killing people. Thief is really about stealing shit, puzzles, and then the weird gothic dark scariness. But I will say that this kind of brought me back to Thief, and while I didn't play the whole game through, I definitely spent a lot of time watching my godsons play the game, and I played it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm familiar with how the story goes, but that new play mode, that new ability for players to use was pretty helpful because it felt more right for the story.
You think we're going to see some crawling in on the show.
I hope so. It feels so right that you wonder how you got by without it in the first one. So it's one of those things where, in all these stories, the bad guys get more hardcore,
right,
as you level up yourself. But the thing is, the realism of The Last of Us means that you can only level up so much. You're still human. It's not like you're playing D&D and you become like a level 12 mage up from a level 2 mage. So as you get deeper in, the crawling matters, the hiding matters, the ability to sneak up on people matters, especially because not all the bad guys are going to be zombies. In many cases,
right.
So, and I think that's a lot of where we're going to be getting into the second one. I think we're going to see a bit more of that. There's always the transition in the zombie lore, whether it's The Walking Dead or The Last of Us,
right,
where the problem goes from the external threat to the fall of society and how the various groups deal with that. So we're gonna see. I mean, we saw some of that at the end of the last season, but we're gonna see some of that here, and I'm excited. I'm also excited about the fact that they brought up that they're sticking to the story of the game, and they're not gonna kind of go their own way.
That's right. Craig Mazin was reported as saying that they're not going to go past The Last of Us Part 2. And the game is so vast, apparently, I say apparently because I haven't played it, that they're splitting the narrative of The Last of Us Part 2 into 2 seasons. So this is like, Craig Mazin has compared this to The Empire Strikes Back. This is that middle section that is going to feel dark. A little.
The Empire Strikes Back does not end in a happy place.
No. And it keeps everybody like on a cliffhanger until Return of the Jedi. And I feel like that's what we're going to get at the end of this season of The Last of Us before we get into the following season, which should theoretically be the final season. He said, what did he say? Craig Mazin basically kind of insulted George R.R. Martin by saying, it's not going to be like, Game of Thrones. It's not going to keep going on past what I've written.
Yeah, there's no there's no edge of the surfboard. Here are my notes. Go do with them what you will stuff. Yes. He's like, and the thing is, The Last of Us Part 2 has an ending, right? So yeah. If it ends there, it ends there. I also feel as if your TV show does not need to encompass the entirety of a game, just like a good video game movie doesn't need to encompass the entirety of a game. It's more about catching, for lack of a better term, the vibes, the essence of the game. You want to tell some of the story deeply, and then you want to let the setting and your ability to capture that world kind of carry the audience. And then if you can get through and kind of get your beginning, middle, and end, you've done a great job. It's when you begin dragging it out or trying to like kind of do every single little thing that's in the game in the film or the TV show that you begin seeing the kind of the cracks in the facade of adaptation. You know what I mean? So right. I'm excited that they're focused. And I'm also excited that they're going to spend time telling a story. I think we've talked about how games are almost like books. And I've long said that one of the things that A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones got right was, at least in the beginning, they went for a season for a book, right? So like the first book in A Song of Ice and Fire is called A Game of Thrones. The television is called Game of Thrones based on that book. But that first season, those first 9 or 10 episodes are based solely on the first book. And that ability to sort of capture the essence of that first book meant that as they moved on through A Clash of Kings and the other novels in the series, they had set the tone pretty much perfectly, right? The first 5 seasons of that show, right? I would say first getting into from the very first episode until the episode in season 6 where Sansa meets up with Jon Snow, and you have that heartwarming reconnection, it's incredible. It's an incredible story.
We've had this
visually.
discussion before, not on, I don't think on any podcast, but amongst us, that where the Game of Thrones showrunners lost the plot is when they didn't have George R. R. Martin's. Yeah, right. They had his broad notes, but they didn't have his actual prose. So that's where they lost the plot.
Exactly. And part of what happened there is that they had the broad notes. They knew the plot, but they didn't have the characterizations. And what you just said, they didn't have the prose. They didn't have the quotes. And the quotes from those characters that they decided to include into the show help us understand how those characters change over the course of the seasons. So by the end of Game of Thrones, the television show, I think a lot of people were confused about how Daenerys went from being who she had been to who she would become. And even Jon Snow's decisions at the end, they weren't, the line from one version of the character to the other wasn't drawn as clearly. But I know that when it comes to The Last of Us Part 2, because of what they're saying, they're focused on maintaining that line. They're focused on maintaining the fidelity to the story. And that's what I'm most excited about, because the actors that they've chosen are fantastic. The way they've decided to like put these scenes together is pretty great. The depictions of the zombies is, bar none. It's a great improvement on the zombie state of art.
Right.
I think we've been dealing with for the last 15 years. So I mean, it's hard to not be excited about a statement that says we're gonna we have an ending in mind.
Yes,
which is nice, right? You don't want it to drag on, and then B, we're going to focus on maintaining the story with such fidelity that this game, which is a long game, is going to take more than just 10 episodes to tell.
But not only fidelity, because it could be like, Zack Snyder was arguably faithful to Watchmen, but in his interpretation, it was so slavishly faithful that it felt cold and antiseptic.
Yes, I think faithful and fidelity are slightly different, at least in my book. I think it's important to be faithful in the wide and general sense to what the story was trying to say.
Sure. The tone,
yeah. When I say fidelity, I kind of mean like the quality of the storytelling is going to enmesh with the quality of the video game storytelling. And they're not going to do those things where, Zack Snyder is famous for basically like having a slow-mo into a pause that is effectively a pain from a comic book, right?
Right.
I'm sure there's going to be a couple shots that are going to be, pixel for pixel what's on the screen when you're playing the video game. But at the same time, the young woman playing Ellie is not the same as the Ellie character in she's not exactly the same as the Ellie character in the game.
Sure.
And that's for the better.
Yeah.
She's more real, she's more visceral, she's more tender, to be honest.
Yeah.
There's a bit more
I mean, the acting is so much more nuanced.
Right, exactly, because she's got to be, first of all, you have to see her face all the time. When you're playing the game, you see her back. Like you have to. In the game, the character doesn't have to have facial expressions because it's a third person, third person narrative. So you're behind the character that you're playing, and so on screen they all have to like use their faces in ways that we would expect. They have to bring life to a video game, and unlike the game where you get to make the decisions, you don't when you're watching it. But they have to make decisions in the story that allow you to feel like that's the decision you would have made. And that's kind of exciting. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Tosin, I want to throw it to you. What's your relationship with The Last of Us Part 2, the video game, and what are you expecting or hoping to see in this season of The Last of Us on Max?
Yeah, I'd say in terms of my relationship to the game, I've played a little bit of it, but I've also watched watched a playthrough of part of it. And right now I'm actually going back and continuing that saga just so I can get a little bit more background information on what to expect, and it brings a little bit more diversity to the podcast if there's someone who has some idea of what's going on. But for the longest time, I've known some of the major beats, and one of the things I'm interested is how those play out in this in this season, and when they play out in this season, I think is going to be one of those things, because there are some kind of pivotal changes that happen fairly early on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the type of thing where, given that they're being faithful to it, I question how faithful they will be. I think we have heard that those beats will be there. The question is, do they drag those on for a while, or do those happen immediately? So I'm really curious how we end up seeing these things depicted, and also curious for folks who are uninitiated, like the two of you, like how you're gonna feel after these events occur, because it is
no spoilers.
Is, yeah, no spoilers, but it definitely does feel a bit Empire Strikes Back in many aspects of the game. So and I think generally when you see the game, it's grittier than the original one. It's darker. Folks go through things. So I'm curious to see how that's interpreted.
Things. Yes. Okay. That's grim. Folks go through things.
Tosin, you had the opportunity to go to a panel recently for The Last of Us, didn't you?
Yeah, I recently attended an event called Deadline's Contenders, which they bring out but it's basically speed dating for TV, to try and drum up interest from members of the various guilds to check out the shows and potentially help them during award season.
Feature. That should be a feature on Starz, speed dating for TV.
Speed dating for TV. And so one of the shows that came out was the Last of Us Part 2, and on stage they had co-creators Craig Mazin, Neil Druckmann, as well as actor Bella Ramsey. And so they talked a bit about sort of what to expect from season 2, and talked about the increase in kind of scale, scope. I think Bella, who plays Ellie, talked about how one of the things that they did was each day they captured a complete sort of digital render of her figure with just tons of cameras.
Wow.
As they looked to utilize that. And I think one of the key things they brought up was, like, for any of the thing, they tried to do a lot of things practical, but for explosions and sets and stuff, but for things where they did them digitally, really the goal was to make it hard to notice that it's done digitally, so it just kind of feels natural. And I think one of the most poignant things is,
as long as it's better than Legolas on top of that cave troll back in 2003, I'm good.
Honestly, that was not bad at all for the time.
For the time, yes, but it has not aged well.
As long as it's better than Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One, then I think I'm good.
You were okay with Leia, but not Grand Moff Tarkin?
No, I wasn't really okay with Leia either.
Yeah, I think Disney gave us the creeps for a minute there.
So one of the things that the panel ended with Bella saying a couple interesting things. One, in this, it's not really much of a spoiler, but there are times in this season where the relationship between Ellie and Joel are a bit cold, because as you can imagine, interestingly enough, same with Bella, The Last of Us Part 2 takes place years later, and both those characters have aged, right?
Mhm.
And Ellie is now a teenager and going through a lot of sort of teenage things in the midst of this, epidemic. And so one of the things that she noted was, hey, her character goes through wide emotional swings, and at times is often cold as a character to Joel, which she noted how difficult it is to be cold playing as that character to her to the other actors that she plays alongside, right?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to be mean to your co-stars when you love your co-stars.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And everything I've seen from like all the behind the scenes stuff, Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey feel like the best of chums. Like they like look like they like have so much fun together. So it's hard to imagine them, being antagonistic, having to act antagonistic to each other.
Right.
I mean, I feel like anyone in Hollywood who has a problem with Pedro Pascal, they could just come to me.
Right.
We'll talk. If you got a problem with Pedro Pascal, I'll solve your problem.
And I think the other interesting thing that she noted is that her character, essentially kind of becomes like Joel to a degree. So there's a lot of similarities between those two characters as Ellie evolves.
Yeah, that's hard, right? Because, she was innocent and now she's not, and she was hurt, and now she's becoming the guy that she's mad at. And it's kind of like there's almost like we talked about lone wolf, we talked about parent, and that's all going to play out in that weird adolescent way.
My boy was just like me then. My boy was just like me.
Okay, Cats in the Cradle. I was thinking more mundanely the times I talk to my kids and I realize I'm becoming my parents. Except it happens faster when you're living in a zombie world, right?
Right.
and then finally, one of the things that she noted is that, hey, this season just continues to get sadder and colder and more difficult, and that's something for all of us to look forward to as viewers. So
it is the winter of our discontent.
Yeah, I have no idea. Like, you might know, Tosin, because you've been doing some watch through of like playthroughs. Is that I have no idea where this season is going to end, where it's going to cut off and leave us hanging, and I feel like I'm going to be really frustrated about that. And maybe by the time sometime between the end of this season and the beginning of next season, I'll pony up for The Last of Us Part 2 on Steam and play the whole thing through so I can get caught up.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I mean, it's such a pleasurable game. It's just, as much as I love them, I used to wonder why they were making television shows of these games, because the games are so good you don't need a show.
Right.
And then I realized that when you got a full-time situation and you got a family and you're trying to like talk to some toddler that you're raising, suddenly the time you used to have to play the game isn't there. So you'll binge watch Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal.
Right.
As a walkthrough.
Right.
with extra bits.
Like a live action walkthrough. I feel like, and I think we've mentioned this before on Vault 33 on our Fallout podcast, is that I feel like there's I think we've reached this watershed moment with The Last of Us and Fallout where you're talking about why bother. The stories in the games are so good, why bother making them into live action shows again? And I feel like that with The Last of Us, it was this particular narrative was so rich and complex that it really felt like it deserved to be it could deserve to stand alone as an expression in a different medium. And in the case of Fallout, the world building in that show was so rich and complex that it could lend itself to being malleable by really good writers. Like that's what made that worth seeing. And I think I can count maybe on two hands the number of video games prior to those games that I feel would be really truly worthy of adaptation to TV shows or movies. You know, one of the BioShock games, I'm sure, maybe the later what's the one with the God of War? Yeah, maybe one of the later God of War games.
I mean, BioShock would be incredible, and I kind of feel like if they're gonna take, if our society, if the Hollywood industrial complex is gonna take what they're learning from The Last of Us and apply it to BioShock, we might also get something special from there.
I don't know that we have much else to talk about. Any other things that you want to cover before we wrap it up for this evening?
No, I'm in good shape. I think we got the let out.
All right. Yeah, we've shaken the cobwebs off. All right, so the next time you'll be hearing from us again as a group will be sometime the week after the first episode has aired. We got to record the episode, then I got to do all my editing and producing stuff, and then we'll launch it. So stay tuned to this podcast stream, which is Quarantine Zone, and you'll be hearing from us when The Last of Us kicks off again on April 14th. It's coming up real soon. All right. Thanks, you guys. Dwayne and Tosin. Dwayne, you want to talk about where people can find you when you're not here on Quarantine Zone?
You can check me out on Blue Sky, and that's pretty much it right now. What about you, Tosin?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Burnt Toast 45. And yeah, I think that's generally it.
I'm still on, X, and as well as I'm not really active on X, but I'm mostly on Blue Sky and some Threads and all over the place. You can find me at Mr. Babyman. That's my social media handle. Otherwise, once again, leave us a review, like us, add us on iTunes, tell your friends, and in the meantime, we will see you guys when The Last of Us kicks off on April 14th. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, guys.